Have you ever felt disliked by your own people, unwanted, felt like you have no sense of belonging there? Ever felt mistreated, hated by your own blood, your own parents? And by parent here, I mean your mother and your biological mother. Yes, you heard me right, your biological mother. So I'm just also shocked, just as you're shocked, also asking myself questions how it happens that your mother can ooze hatred for you, literally, and even wish that you died at some point. Now, growing up, I don't recall the moments my grandmother came to our home. And this, I mean, my father's mother. But then, by the way, my grandfather was polygamous. So my grandmother that brought forth my father was the second wife. So I could see the other grandmother, who is my father's stepmother, frequent as have chit chats with my parents, laugh, wherever she would cook, she would be outside her compound, her door, shouting, "My grandchildren, cassava is ready, potato, come partake." And we'd go running as if we were competing. But that was not the case with this grandmother I shared direct lineage with. So then it never bothered me until this one day when my mother left for her home, that is for my maternal grandmother's place. And at that time, great hunger had hit the land. And, I think she had depleted all the avenues of fending for us. So she decided to, why not go see my mother? Because really, whenever she would travel to her home, to my maternal grandmother's place, I kid you not, we were so anxious for the time she would come back, because that meant that she would come with, we would have a delicacy that day. My mother's mother was a very loving soul that oozed love, and we could feel it. Very kind, very generous, very warm. So yes, she would pack for her daughter everything. And by everything, I mean even a matchbox. I don't know. Maybe I should ask my mother. I don't know how she would view my mother, that she would even pack for her a matchbox. Right from everything to a matchbox, and even a packet of salt. So really, I must admit, I was always looking forward to the times when my mother would be like, "We are traveling to your maternal grandmother's home," because we were all elated and looking forward to that moment. We wouldn't even sleep. Anyway, so she travels there. She leaves us with what she thought she would take us through the number of days she would be away. She had not told us how many days she's going to be away. And, we depleted everything she had left us. I would again admit that we over-rationed ourselves. Children just being children and feeling that mommy is not there to ration for us so we can have to our fullest. So at some point we overfed ourselves, right? So I was the one that had been left in charge of my two followers. And I guess I was around 6, 8 there. My follower was around 6. And my little brother then was around barely 1 year. So we deplete what was there, and there is nothing, and more so, there is nothing for this 1-year-old baby. And so the baby begins crying uncontrollably. I try everything and nothing works. So a brilliant idea strikes my mind. And, you know, I think of my grandmother has some green maize in her backyard behind her kitchen. Why can't I go there and ask her for some to prepare for this given boy? So I go there, I take my little brother, I, you know, carry him by my side, and I go to my grandmother's place, and I find her, I think she was preparing to leave for church. I find her outside her compound, and I am like, Grandma, Mommy is not there. She has not been there for quite a while right now. And Daddy has been crying uncontrollably with no food left so far. Daddy is this little boy. And my grandmother looks at me. Then she breaks into a sarcastic laughter. Anyway, it doesn't bother me. And she tells me, I have no maize to give you. I think she's joking, right? In the same moment, a neighbor's child arrives, and he tells her something. And I see her pick a punker and head for, 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 for the garden to cut some maize. And at that moment, I'm like, wow, at last my spirits are elated that eventually it is happening. I'll get something for my little bro. He comes out of the farm, of the yard, and hands everything she had cut to this boy. Then I'm like, okay, Grandma, are you sure you were serious? Because I thought you were joking. Then she goes into her house, and the next time she's coming out, she's all dressed for church. You know, my grandmother is a staunch Christian, or she's religious, that she even has a collar. I don't know whether you call it a collar, the white band they put around their neck. And she serves at the pulpit for that matter. And whenever she begins praying, she begins right from her gate, which is next to the road, because she borders some main road back home. So this is a person you expect to be oozing love, kindness, generosity, which is something I believe when she's on the pulpit, she's preaching to the people, because what would you be telling the congregation if not those values? So yes, she leaves. Guys, I was left there crying uncontrollably. Yeah. And, you know, I left, went back home, of course, still thinking, really, how can a grandmother be so kind and generous to a neighbor and then leave her own grandchildren, in fact, her first grandchildren, starve? Yet again, she's leaving for church in the same state. Lucky enough, that evening, my mother arrives. Remember, guys, what I told you whenever she would arrive from her home? So yeah, that evening, we happened to have a delicacy, ugali samaki, that is fish, that she had come with it from the mother. Even the ugali, by the way, the unka, the flour, was packed by my grandmother. So at that moment, I tend to at least forget what had transpired, but I was sure to tell her the next day. I, then I went like, Mommy, do you know the mistreatment we've we received from grandma? Can you imagine grandma denied us some green maize, but then she dared give it to a neighbor? My mother does not react. In fact, she behaves as though she has not heard me. But then I was sure she heard. So I'm like, okay, Mom, what is happening? I let it slide. The second instance is my cousins had visited, and they had visited my grandmother. So we get news that our cousins are around. And again, I ran there together with my sister because it's so natural. We had not seen them for a long time. And, so we get there. Grandmother goes to her kitchen. She prepares tea. She brings out bread and she begins spreading it with Blue Band. Those who were there in the 90s and early 2000s, you can relate with this. Bread was not for everyone. And leave alone bread, a spread bread was not for everyone, guys. Some of us would see such only on Christmas or on during the times our fathers who'd always leave home and go for centuries and only to return back. And when they would return back, they would be having a bread. And that bread slapped different. I don't know. I don't know whether the ingredients have changed, but there was some sweetness in that bread. So she spreads the bread, brings it to the table, plus tea. She goes back to the kitchen, comes back with a plate of boiled bananas. Then she makes it clear to us, my sister and I, that please don't stretch your hand to the plate that has bread. So I'm like, okay, Grandma, what have you said? That we should not stretch our hand to the plate that has bread. And really, the way I had waited for, I was literally salivating, waiting for that bread. Then you tell us that for us, me and my sister, we're going to take the boiled bananas. If you come from the Western region, you know that bananas are everywhere. They are in every homestead. That behind the kitchen, every homestead's backyard has some plantation or some plants of banana. And there are times when there is no any other food, and so banana becomes breakfast, lunch, and even supper. So really nobody is looking forward to enjoy eating bananas. So yeah, again, I eat the bananas, or we eat the bananas with my sister, and immediately I'm done. I ask my sister, please let's go home. So we didn't even get to interact with our cousins. So we get home, and again we narrate to, or I let my mother know of this given instance, because it is another instance, second instance I'm marking from my grandmother, and I'm feeling like a child. That is so unfair. Remember, I'm telling you, by then I was around 7 and 8. So the memories are still clear in my head. You know, one good thing with a child is one soul that even if you gave them a pinch of something, they'll go praising your name. Within you, you know that, I didn't give them anything, or I was mean to them. But to them, that means a lot. So really, my grandmother would have just even picked a piece and shared, or had as me share with my sister. I don't think if I would have picked that impression. So I tell my mother, and again she snobs me. I'm like, okay, mom, what is happening? Are you approving the mistreatment from grandma? But if you are a person from my era, you know that African mothers were never questioned. So again, I let it slide. So seemingly, then I could not interpret my mother's responses. The silence and the snobbing were responses. To her, it felt like nothing because she was used to it, or at some point it was bound to happen, and so nothing was strange. So later on, I come to learn that my father, from the onset, he has never been approved by my grandmother, the mother. That my grandmother would treat my father as a slavery, would treat my father as a stepson. Remember, there is a stepmother, or my father has a stepmother in the compound, who is my grandfather's first wife. But I've never seen such treatment from her. And if anything, to date, you hear my father talk of mom has no sugar, or mom has complained to me about this, then it is not her biological mother, but it is her stepmother. So yes, she received cruelty, unkindness, mistreatment, disapprovals from the mother. He'll tell you that my grandmother would have him do all the house chores, right from all the house chores before leaving for school, including taking care of milking, going to the farm and cutting napier for the cattle before leaving for school, going to the river, and basically everything. Like literally before my father leaves for school, he would ensure that, or my grandmother would ensure that he had left the homestead, everything in its place. This was despite him having other siblings. He is the first one. And the way our grandmothers gave birth, there is no great gap between children. So yeah, all these children should be able to at least do something at the end of the day. But they never did that. Now, he'll tell you that he would also ensure that there is even water before leaving for school. So he would literally go to the stream. And our stream is, it's not far away, but it is far away, and it is so deep that when you're coming from the stream, it's so steepy that if you just do one mistake of sliding, you're back there in the stream. So literally our stream, when you're down there fetching water, you can see the person passing up there at a 90 degrees angle. And it is, I'm told it is how many feet? Almost I don't know, 40 feet up. So imagine this boy having to go to that stream every other morning to ensure that there is water for both the house use and the cows. Anyway, that was not an issue. He'll tell you that he paid school fees for himself. Yes, he paid school fees for himself. And not because my grandfather was not there to take his responsibility. If anything, I never happened to meet my grandfather. But then I am told he died when I was around 2 years old. So really, I have no clear picture of him. But the praises my father and my mother sing as far as my grandfather is concerned are so immense. My mother will tell you that it's the grandfather that made her, or it's my grandfather that made her stay with my father or tolerate my father's family. So yeah, I'm told my grandfather was so responsible, a very responsible man. And in fact, he was working with the water company. That's what I'm told. So he had money, and even though he was polygamous, he was a responsible father. So my father tells you he would give the mother, my grandmother, school fees meant for his children, her children, and should pay for the other ones, but then not pay for my father. Remember, my father is her firstborn. I know you will ask, why did father not go straight to grandfather? The reason is, he'll tell you that my mother or my grandmother was very keen not to allow him to get to the father, my grandfather. And you'll be told every time he would make a move, or every time he would be going to see, or he would be, purporting to go closer to the father, my grandmother would be in the vicinity, and he would always, cut him short and be like, what are you going to tell your father? So he would always be sure what message is this boy going to give to the father. Of course, it's so keen that it didn't escape from his mouth that school fees has not been paid. That was not the sad part. The sad part is, and whenever my father narrates this, to this point, seemingly that Mzee has not healed from childhood trauma. The inner child, the child in him, I don't know whether that child will heal unless when he dies. So he tells us that he would always dread for moments when there would be moonlight. Moonlight to him brought tears. Why? The mother would always be sure that, or ensure that whenever there is moonlight, the son had to be in her farm digging, or in their farm digging. So my father would be like, if the moon comes out at 7 p.m., that's the time he'll get to the farm. Because remember, the entire day he's been away schooling. So similarly, my grandmother wanted to use the natural light. So whatever time the moonlight will come out, if it is at 10, she'll be sure to wake my father up to go dig, and the only time he'll be leaving the farm is when the moon is setting or when the moonlight disappears. I again remember my grandfather was a responsible person. So really, even going to his own farm, I'm sure it was managed by, he would give out money for people to do that, what the son was doing. After this narration, it became so clear to me that that is the same extension, or my grandmother is just extending the hatred he had for the son to us, his first grandchildren, as it were. So having listened to all this from my father, I was tempted to ask him, Daddy, are you sure this is your mother? But then motherhood is so natural, right? You can question fatherhood, but then you cannot question motherhood. And motherhood is so beautiful. No wonder I'm also a mother, we have this unconditional love for our children. That regardless, even if my child hurts me today, I'm sure in the next minute I'd have forgotten about it. Because motherhood is so precious, right from the time of conception, carrying the pregnancy all through the trimesters, then to the labor ward, then to seeing that child. No wonder immediately you've given birth as a woman, immediately you see the face of this baby, you tend to forget all the pains and the struggles that you've had to endure to the point the child comes forth. So I couldn't ask that question if this is the mother, you know. And I began making my own speculations in my head. I was like, okay, why would she hate the son so passionately? And my stupid thoughts came up with speculations. So one of the speculations was, could it be that my grandmother conceived my father when she was not ready? That is when she was at the prime of her age, and so my father cut short her life then. No wonder she doesn't like him. By then, the difference between my father and my grandmother, right now, if you look at them, you might think they are siblings. It's very small. But then again, during my grandfather's times or our grandparents' times, women used to give birth at a very tender age. So I don't again think it is so. So that is one of the thoughts that came into my head. Could it have been that she tried aborting my father and he became stubborn? And so whenever he sees him, he's like, you guy, I didn't want you and you forced your way into this earth. Or could it have been that my grandmother had another suitor somewhere and my father happened, and so he had to end up with my grandfather as a second wife because he had no option? I don't know. So those are questions that, unless she comes on board one day and tells it and says clearly why she hates my father so much, really, nobody will ever get to unravel that. This is a type of a mother that when she's broke or she has no sugar, she'll send somebody, go tell Ibrahim is my father, that I have no sugar. My father will ensure that he gives that person sugar and he'll take it to my grandma. But then, you know what? He'll say, or she'll say, she'll tell people who cares to hear, she'll tell her other children that there's nothing Ibrahim helps him with. he even quoted the same scenario that I even said so and so to go tell him that I have no sugar, and he did nothing. That's the grandmother I'm talking about. At one point, his house needed repair. It's only my father who is home right now. The other siblings of his, all of them are outside. So my grandmother's house needed repair. My father has some trees in his farm, and my grandmother, instead of coming herself to tell the son that, son, I need some hoods to repair my house, he sends someone that go tell Ibrahim that I'm in need of some hoods for the purposes of repairing my house. Anyway, a mother is a mother. So my father gets to his hoods and cuts some enough for the activity. So he gives them to whoever was sent, who takes them there. Do you know what the mother told my father's siblings? That my house is almost, or my house was almost collapsing on me. I even went to your brother Ibrahim and asked him whether he could give me some hoods, and he blatantly denied me. And so I had to go buy them. You know, again, he tells them, and it gets a way of getting back to my father. And my father is like, really? What should I do to prove to my mother that she is my mother? When is my mother going to approve me? When is my mother going to say something positive about me? By the way, there was a time he told my father that his generation, his children won't succeed. It was just the other day that his children won't succeed unless he went crawling and kneel before her. Whatever she meant, I don't know. But she's a kind of a mother that is always cursing the son and the generation. In fact, she has this slogan that whenever something negative befalls my father, you will hear her say this: the God I pray has finally answered my prayers. Who does that? Who celebrates when their child is, facing misfortune, is facing troubles? I'm yet to understand that. To this point, we left home for some 2 decades, came back, it's now another decade, and nothing has worked. In fact, for this other 1 decade, my grandmother has never stepped into our compound, despite the fact that it is only this son of hers, who is on the compound, as the rest are away. If anything, whoever should be taking care of her right now and ensuring that she's safe is this son that is back home. But she's not even bothered. But every Sunday she'll be going to church to preach the word. Now, I was forgetting to tell you, my father also tells you that whenever he's walking in the village and he meets people who do not know him and he introduces himself as so-and-so's child, people, literally you can see expressions on the facial expressions, reactions on the people's faces, that they become shocked that, no, you didn't say that you're so-and-so's child. So for those who, many of them keep the reactions to themselves or keep the words to themselves. My father says when he asks them, okay, why do you look shocked? They'd be like, no, it's nothing. But you can tell it on their faces. For those who care, they are so bold and they ask my father this, are you sure that is your mother? And father is like, yeah, that's my mother. That's a mother that brought me to this world. And they'll be like, no. The things that mother speaks against you. So imagine she's speaking against the sons, even to the outsiders, to the people. You might think she's the stepmother when she's really the mother. So guys, as I come to the conclusion of this, I just want to know in the comment section, have you ever experienced anything closer to this? Have you ever felt unwanted or received reactions from the people you love, from the people you call blood, and the reactions were unwarranted? I told you this on this platform. If you go to the description box, we are here, the naked us, the authentic us, with our feelings. So this is a space with no judgment. This is a space for us to bring forth our feelings and our thoughts. So feel free to write or leave your comment in the comment section. I'll be sure to react to it and help you wipe your tears as you also help me wipe my tears. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.